Hey there, I'm going to be showing you the different cast on and cast off methods used in circular knitting. You can use the different methods for different patterns or projects, and in many patterns you actually use several of these together. We will be learning how to do the cinched cast on and cast off, and also the waste yarn cast on and cast off. And we're also going to be learning a couple of different ways to finish your edges using the waste yarn method. The yarn I'm going to be using here is the Malabrigo Rios. You can use any worsted weight yarn. Make sure that your machine is in a circular knitting position. So you're going to drop some tail down into the center of your machine, and how much you drop really depends on what project you're making, but for this method we're just going to drop a little bit. Always go under the first black hook. When you're circular knitting, it doesn't matter what cast on method that you use here, you're always going to do it this way. You're simply going to go around the machine, going underneath every other needle and skipping the other needles in between. I'm going to go ahead and speed this up until we get around to the beginning. So when you get to the end, you should be going behind the white needle, and that's the last white needle. If it's not going behind, you probably messed up and need to start over. Go ahead and reset your counter if you haven't already done so, and we're going to start knitting. Now this is the standard or most commonly used cast on method. I call it the cinched cast on method. It's most used for making hats or things that are stuffed. And also another tip that I wanted to mention, I do not have this anchored down for this tutorial, but you can always hold your knitting machine right above that leg and it'll keep it stable. So I've only knitted about 30 rows here. This is not a pattern, this is just showing you guys the different methods to use, so pay no attention to the length. So what we do here, the white needle there, that is the last needle. So you're going to drop some yarn down into the center. I do leave a little bit extra at the end because we're going to be using this to cast off. Just make sure that your yarn is going underneath that last white needle, whatever you do, because if you forget it or skip it, you're going to have a drop stitch and it's going to mess up your whole project. So go ahead and put your yarn on a needle. Now the best needle to use for these are the ones that are a little bit angled. It just kind of helps scoop up your stitches onto your needle when you're casting off. The most common way to cast off, you're always going to end on that white needle like I said, and you're going to start pulling your stitches off with that first black needle that drops down. Now you could go under and scoop every single one of these, and that's probably the safest way to do it. Me personally, I kind of pick my yarn up and just knit all the way back around until I have the 3 last white needles up on the machine. And this just makes sure that I don't accidentally drop any of those stitches there at the end. And then I'm going to start on the very first black one. I'm going to turn my machine where it's just easier for me to look at, because if I do it the other way, I always end up dropping stitches. But you're just going to go through and pull your stitches off one at a time in the beginning because you're going to have really tight tension. And then as you go further around, your tension's going to get a little bit looser and you can pick up more stitches. Now I will say, when you drop all of the needles like this, it does make it a little bit more likely for the stitches to fall off, so you just have to be very careful. Do not pull sideways, always pull straight through, and you can also even put your finger over the next needle like that so that you don't drop off the next stitch. And once you do it for a long time, you'll be a pro at it, and you'll notice here too that your tension will start getting looser, and then you can just pick up a lot more stitches and it goes a lot faster. The end, you will have to crank those last 3 stitches and take those off one at a time. But that's it. So all of the stitches are off of the machine and you're secure and good to go. So this is what it looks like once it's off the machine. You can see the edges are curled. That's completely normal. But using this method, you can cinch your project. And like I said, this is used most commonly, I would say, especially with beginners. It is the easiest one to learn, and it's very versatile. You can use it for a lot of things, but it's most commonly used for hats. I do use this to make pumpkins. I also use part of this technique in my baby bonnet tutorial. So you can use it for a lot of things, but that's basically it. You can cinch it, and I will show you guys the waist yarn cast on next. Now we're going to be doing my favorite, probably, the waist yarn cast on, and we're also going to waist yarn cast off. And for this one, you have to have 2 yarns, your main working yarn, and then a contrasting color. Now it is important to make sure that the color is contrasting, because if not, it may make it a little harder. But we've already done this before. You cast on the exact same way that you do the other one, but you're using your waist yarn for this method. There's not a set number amount of rows that I use for waist yarn cast on. I probably do anywhere between 5 and 10. I probably do more than I should, just because, I don't know, I like to be safe and just want to be sure that I don't drop any stitches. So just do a few rows, whatever you feel comfortable with. When you get back to your black needle to start your working yarn, it's kind of like just starting in the middle of knitting, if that makes sense. You do not have to do the every other needle. You just put it in, you get it underneath that first black needle, and you just keep knitting straight through. You do not have to cast on again. You just continue going. And the easiest way I find to do this, using the Addy King anyways, is I kind of pinch both between my 2 fingers and then push my thumb on the counter just until that first black needle goes down in with the yarn. And then I just go ahead and reset my counter and just start knitting away. This method is good for many different projects and patterns. Like I said, what do you use really depends on what you're making. I actually use this a lot. I use this a lot for headbands, anything with a straight edge or a finished edge. It's very, very versatile, and I actually use it with the cinched method. Like I said, the baby bonnet uses half waist yarn and then half cinched. So this one is a really, really good one, and it's not that hard. A lot of people think that it's more difficult, but it's really not. So you end on the white needle just like you would regularly, and we're going to do the same exact thing. We're going to pick up that waist yarn again. And if you noticed, I dropped a whole lot of extra yarn there at the end before cutting it, of the blue, and that is because I'm going to be using a different finishing technique at the end, and I will show you that here in a little bit. But it does need more yarn because I'm going to be crocheting all the way around the edge, so I need that extra to work with. This is really easy here. This is one of the reasons why I love the waist yarn cast off, because you finish and you literally just keep cranking and it will fall off of the machine. Now the first row is just going to get all the yarn out from underneath those needles, and then when you go back around again, it's just going to drop off of the machine, and you don't have to do anything with the needle, and it is super speedy. So that's it, and let's show you how to finish. So this is what it looks like whenever it's finished, and on this top edge with the short tail, we're going to be closing it together shut, and for that one I'm going to be using the 5mm crochet hook, and on the other method I'm going to be using the 4. So let's go ahead and do this one. And like I said, we used a different length of tail for different closing methods, and I will show you why. So this one here, we don't need that extra yarn to work with. We're going to be slip stitching it all the way down to the end, and that tail is just going to secure that last stitch. So we didn't need a whole lot of tail to do that. So just go ahead at the very end and kind of make a crease fold where that tail is, and then work it all the way back until your very 2 loops there match up, and then put them both on your hook. And you're just going to slip one through the other. And then you're going to grab one from the same side, slip it through that one, and go back over and do the same thing. I do tend to rotate my hook on that front row towards the back because I find that if I rotate my hook towards wherever the knot is, it just goes a whole lot faster. You can use the single crochet for this if you wanted to leave a longer tail and do it. I like the seam to be very low profile, non-bulky. That is why I do it this way. So yeah, you could use it that way if you wanted to. It would just be a little bit more bulky if you did that. I'm going to go ahead and go through to the other side. And you kind of have to go slow at the end because sometimes you can miss one if you're not paying really close attention. And then whenever you get to your last loop, all you're going to do is just grab that tail and then slip it through, and all of your stitches are secure. And look how pretty that edging is. It's perfect. So all you have to do to remove your waste yarn is just cut it from the bottom up. Make sure not to grab any blue stitches, only waste yarn stitches. Now I will say there are some people that can easily find the very bottom piece of the waste yarn and pull the whole thing off in like 2 seconds. I have tried this for well over a year. I just cannot figure it out. So this is what method that I use. If you're lucky and you can figure that out, I'm very jealous, and it would probably be faster, but this really doesn't take long either. Just get your waste yarn off. That's the most important part. So that is what it looks like. It is so pretty, you guys. I can't even tell you. I'm totally obsessed. This is perfect for scarves or if you're doing headbands. So let's do the other side. Now this one, think of this like if you were making a sleeve, or I use this method in my bonnet tutorial. We have a lot of extra yarn. We're going to be working our way all the way around the edge. So you've got your loops here, and we're going to start with where your waste yarn is hanging out. We're actually going to go to the right one loop, and we're just going to pull your working yarn through that one. And then you're going to go back into it and then work around to the left if you're right-handed. I'm not really sure how left-handed people crochet, but this is how I do it. And you're going to be just slip stitching your working yarn through both stitches on your hook. So you'll have your new stitch on your hook and then your previous one, and just pull that through all the way around. Now I will say that sometimes I do a single crochet on this if I need more of a bounce. Like on my coffee cup pattern, it has to be more stretchy at the bottom, so you just need that extra give. But if I'm doing like a tighter edge like a sleeve or the baby bonnet hat, I will just do the single slip stitch through there with that working yarn. But again, it just depends on what you're making, so just keep that in mind whenever you're doing something. Like if you come up with something on your own, if you need it to have more give, just add the extra bounce in it. If not, just do it like I'm doing it here. And when you get all the way back around, just make sure that nothing looks gappy, and go to that very first stitch that you crocheted and just do a regular slip stitch through the piece on your hook, and you should be good to go. And if you'll see, you have a nice finished open edge. And we're just going to cut the waste yarn off like you did previously. So this is what it looks like. And this is the waste yarn cast on and waste yarn cast off. This is an open finished edge. It looks beautiful and perfect. And this is a closed finished edge. It also looks beautiful as well. Waste yarn is really easy, you guys. I'm telling you, the fact that it can just fall off the machine and you don't have to deal with the whole needle. But sometimes you do have to do that depending on what you're making, especially if you're making hats and such. But that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed.